again. Right.
Abby's just come in.
That's quite all right. You're fine in perfection. Right, good evening. Welcome to this meeting in the museum. And again, to members of the public who've joined us this evening, and to anyone who is following the meeting on Zoom. Again, general housekeeping, the restrictions that have been lifted, so we're not asking you to wear a mask around the building, but obviously if people choose to do so, respect their wishes. Again, if you would remember to speak up for the purposes of what I'm told is called an audio feed, this thing. For those who are speaking, no, that's all right. Do we have any apologies?
No, Chair.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Just for the point of probity, I will declare that I was part of the Uppingham Neighbourhood Plan original group. I also have retail business in Uppingham and retail premises, but they are the other side of the main road. I have checked with the legal officer. I don't think it precludes me from taking part in the debate of the decision, but for the points of probity and transparency, I'm declaring that. Thank you. 3 petitions, questions?
No, Chair.
None. And we then move on to planning applications, of which the first is Barleythorpe, the occasion of the site visit. Over to you, Mr. Mill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, members will recall this was an application 6 dwellings that was deferred to the last meeting. Just to refresh members of the site, this is the site outline proposed in red, and this was the layout that we were looking at. Again, 6 properties, really, with the entrance to the central roundabout. What was discussed as part of the debate for the last meeting was in relation to additional conditions. I referred to members to condition 14, which was relating to the existing wall around the site was to be retained. Members wished that to be added. That's now been added on condition 14. And also, we discussed and debated the green screen. You'll know condition 15 now requests final details of the green screen, which goes across the southern border of the site and provides further screening for the Clock House Court properties. So that condition has now been added, and final details of the green screen is going to be submitted to us for final approval. Also, it was deferred for a further consultation with the Affordable Housing Officer in relation to the proposed commuted sum. You'll see that Appendix 1 of the agenda, we have attached the Cabinet report, which set the commuted sum threshold for Rutland County Council. That states that the affordable housing contributions will be sought for developments between 6 and 10 units in the form of cash payments, which are commuted to the completion of the units within the development. As this is a development for 6 units, that's why the commuted sum has been requested. Now, obviously, part of the deferral was for the site visit. Now, during the course of the site visit, members requested I looked into various different aspects, one of which was a group of trees on the southern border, which you can see in this photograph. It wasn't clear from the plan what was happening with these particular trees. I was asked to determine with the applicant and the tree officer what was happening with the trees. Now, with the submitted application, a tree report was submitted by the applicant, which their qualified tree man said that these were category C trees. They had a low amenity value, were in poor condition. I reconsulted our Rutland tree officer who looked at this application originally, and he carried out a site visit originally. He concurs with the tree consultant of the applicant. These trees are not worthy of retention, have a low amenity value. The applicant has now submitted an amended master plan which shows these trees to be removed, and a condition, the approved plan condition number 2 is going to be amended to replace that with a plan that shows these trees are to be removed. Also on the site visit, members picked out this particular gate opening, which was to the western boundary of the site. You can see that within the addendum of this that has been handed out, that now we're looking for a condition of final details of the treatment to replace the metal gate was submitted for final approval, and that the wall be retained in its original form. So a condition has now been added, you can see in your addendum, that's going to deal with final treatment of that particular gateway opening. Also within the addendum, you'll see the commuted sum has been recalculated for a more up-to-date figure, which now shows £16,214. On site visit was also to look at the impacts on neighbouring properties, in particular the Clock House Court houses. Members were shown this particular plan, which showed that the difference in levels and the window treatments of the Clock House Court properties in the top left-hand corner. You can see very limited openings to the upper windows of Clock House Court, very small hallway windows generally, and the gable ends of the single-storey rear projections have no openings. We couldn't get near the boundary of the site because it was overgrown, but these images are quite useful, I felt, for members on the site visit to give a closer indication of what the situation was with the Clock House Court dwellings. Our recommendation still remains, Mr. Chairman, that we defer it to yourself for approval, subject to the signing of the Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm just going to pause for a minute, checking on a procedural point that has cropped up. Okay, I won't be a minute, just wait for it before I ask Councillor Blacksmith to start.
Yes, just a comment to make about.
Sorry, if I just pause you, I'm just checking a procedural thing. Yeah. Right. I think I better just inform committee what the issue is. Basically, members, Councillor Cross wasn't at the original meeting, but I mean, it was certainly my understanding that he would be free to take full part in this debate. In other words, although it was a deferred thing, we've had the presentation, and he would be free to both take part in the debate and vote. The legal officer is just checking that is the case. So before we move to the vote, Councillor Cross, I'll just make absolutely sure that we are in order. But sorry about the delay, but that was a last minute thing. Councillor Blacksmith.
Yes, it's a comment about the.
So to say, how does that apply to myself? Because I wasn't there last time. I wasn't elected.
Quite. I mean, I don't know, again, I'll check with the legal officer, but as the person chairing this meeting, I would think it was far more appropriate that you both took part, both of you, both took part in the debate and voted. Yeah, Councillor Oxley.
To clarify, Mr. Chairman, is that because they weren't privy to the deputations which were made? Is that one of the reasons why?
I don't know. I'll bring the legal officer.
I'll just say what we're doing is we're just checking the rules, the constitutional rules on what we could do with planning. So I just want to make sure that if you've not been on a previous, if you've not when it's been debated previously in any context, I'm sure you can, but I'm just absolutely double checking, that's all.
Okay.
Be back with you in 5 minutes.
You'll be amused to get legal niceties of your previous At long last, Councillor Langston, would you like to speak to them?
Yes, it's about the access and the visibility squares on the entrance to the site. I went past the site twice today, and there were 3 vehicles there, one on the
Yes.
southern and as you go in the southern part, and the same time I went past, there were a big van next to the driveway and 2 cars. So I think it's still an issue, to be honest.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm letting you carry on. Is, any
No,
other-
that's it. That's it.
Other members? Councillor Cross.
If I may, Mr.
Oh,
Chairman,
you're limited to speak, yeah?
you know, I'd probably like to concur with Councillor Blangsby. And I think it's slightly unfortunate we don't have a staff officer from Highways here this evening, because the site visit does certainly highlight the problems that might exist should vehicles be parked either side of the exit here. If I may go on to my other comment, which will be about the gate. And if Paul could probably just bring the picture up of that gate. And I think it's going to involve the ownership of the kitchen garden wall and the jurisdiction thereof as to who may be responsible for that particular gateway. Because within that gateway, behind that lovely piece of corrugated iron that we farmers use so much, is rather a lovely wrought iron gate. And this is in a conservation area. And it would worry me if that particular part of this structure were to be lost. And I would like sort of probably just further comment upon the wall, who owns it, who is responsible for it, and the possibilities of either refurbishing that gate and or including maybe another door on this side to help with any privacy that may be required by the occupants either side of the wall.
Mr. Milne, have you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the part of the position states that the gate.
Paul, I might just stop you. Unfortunately, I did not put my hearing aids in. My wife will give me some stick when I get home. So if you could just go steady,
Yeah.
speak up and be very clear.
Yeah, so part of the condition states that the wall is to be retained. So within the wording of the condition, we're asking for final details to be submitted to us on how this is going to be finished. Now, if members wishes to explore the retention of the iron gate, if at all possible, if it is a condition to do so, and look at what treatment we could put either side of the metal gate for privacy, then we can do that. We're obviously referring it back to the chairman for section 106 reasons, and we can go through that with the chairman, the detail of the finish of that gate.
Who owns the wall?
That'd be the applicant.
Okay, so furthermore, Mr. Chairman, as I did actually attend the site again today with Councillor for safety reasons, and the state of the wall does need attention. Now, has that been included in any conditions?
No, just one that states the wall will be retained.
I think the committee should consider as to whether the wall should be conditioned so that its condition is improved to maintain its structure and safety.
And presumably, if we approve this this evening, then the purchasers of property will be responsible for part of the wall. I would imagine. Yes, come back to you, Councillor.
It does need pointing, actually. The wall needs scraping, you know, raking out and pointing to make it solid again.
I think at the moment, I think the condition simply said it will be retained.
Yes.
I mean, if the committee feels that it ought to be retained in an appropriately good state, I'm putting it very, very vaguely, then I think we could beef up that condition if that's what you thought was appropriate. Sorry, Councillor McCartney and Councillor Oxley.
That was only my question, Chair. Paul, I have no recollection from last meeting's papers about whether there was a management company or something for communal areas or roadways. Is there?
Yes, one of the conditions of.
And is any of the wall included in that, I suppose, is it?
Yeah, there's within the condition says boundary walls. I don't remember what the condition is, but there is a condition related to the maintenance.
Condition 4, SI 6.
Yes, condition 6. Says it includes walls and fencing within the wording of condition 6.
So that condition's probably already there, Chair. So
Councillor Oxley.
It's just a question. I think I did ask the question last time. The wall is not listed, is it? It's in the conservation area, but the wall itself is not actually listed.
No,
I think that's correct. Yes.
correct.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just to exactly concur with Councillor Cross, and I was very grateful that I had the opportunity to visit the site this afternoon, having been away last week. But I think we can do a little more than that, because if you actually look at the actual structure of the wall, it has a certain lineage about it, being, I think, the kitchen garden of the hall, and it has a particular style of tile capping, which is in bad condition in certain areas. Now, I would have thought the developer would not object or would intend to actually put that into a state of repair that would take it, I think, several decades forward, particularly, if you like, I guess, the end value of the properties that are going to be sold. But I think it is incumbent on us, I think, to realise that there is a certain history to this area, and we should seek to have the best outcome that we possibly can achieve, with only tightening up on the conditions somewhat to achieve that. Not to be draconian, but I think part of that the developer will probably see that as sensible anyway, but we may just want to be a little bit more precise with our condition.
Sorry,
So through you, obviously, I think that the scheme is aimed at the higher end, I think, of the market. So I think anybody moving into those properties is going to want these issues dealt with. I think we can probably amend one of the conditions for the wall, so the one that says that the wall shall be retained, perhaps we can just add on the wall be retained and the details of showing the wall's structural stability and where any maintenance is proposed, details of that maintenance, so that we can have that and make sure that it's appropriate.
I think that is what 2 or 3 members already indicated. Well, Councillor Oxley, yes.
Well, just not wanting to labour the point, there are 2 sides to the wall. And if we're going to make sure that the wall is in good order, what's going to happen to the side that's not actually within the, there must be some sort of arrangement already, I should think, with the owners of the existing properties. So it is going to be a little bit complicated, but I'm sure that, I mean, anything that we can do to ensure the wall is maintained.
I think we can make, the best we can do is to make sure that the wall is details of its structural stability and that it's okay. I don't think we can get the applicants to reasonably go around and repoint both sides of it or anything like that.
No, but I just thought I should make that point.
That is a very fair point. Councillor Langley.
Not making that point. There's another point that you've got to have access to maintain it on the other side from the other residents.
But that would be
Legal.
yeah, that's illegal.
So, I mean,
Very similar.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. Sorry, were you indicating you wish to speak or indicating somebody else? Councillor.
I'm new to this committee, as you well know, but looking at the only extant plan we have, which is 2011, it says at CS 19 and 20 that we're required as a council to minimise the impact on climate change, including measures to take account of future changes in climate change, and that goes back to 2011. I know that it is being considered for the new policy arrangement, but this has also been repeated in the NPPF. 152166, it says the government was supporting transition to low carbon utilisation of new homes. It seems to me that there's been no reference whatsoever in any of this applications to implying those criteria, and I feel that is disappointing, and that it could have been addressed, and I think it should be addressed. As I say, I understand this is coming in for the policy changes, the new policy local plan, but I think, and I would like to see that all future major developments of over a certain size should incorporate those plans.
I entirely agree with you. I think I'd probably remove the word major.
Sorry?
I think I'd probably remove the word major.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yes, Councillor Oxley.
Yeah, well, I just say I'm following up on that point. I think it would be worthy if I don't think we can condition it at the moment, but I think if the developers could take on board those comments, it would be very helpful. And I think also I believe that the site visit was extremely useful. All those who went along and had a look. It also gave us so we had a chance to look at the site, and to have someone say, well, house 6 will be there, house 5 will be there. We asked the questions about the trees, because it's very difficult to try and judge an application from a presentation on a screen. It's important that we actually do go. And I was impressed by the size of the site. I also welcome the presentation we had on affordable housing as an offshoot of this. I think that was very helpful to actually have the housing officer talking to us on a Zoom, albeit on a Zoom meeting. But I think it gave us a clearer idea of what sort of criteria is currently being used, because there wasn't some ambiguity, I think, from the officer's presentation last time. But only in that it was a specialist, needed specialist input, and it was useful to have that specialist input. As I say, we had quite a long debate last time, so I don't want to date I believe that the presentation that we had, the site visit and everything, I'm now minded to approve the recommendation. But as I say, I'll wait to hear what everybody else has to say. But I can't see any reason why we shouldn't refuse it.
Well, before I move to a vote on the proposal, is there anybody else? I was going to say, Councillor Banksby, the business of the visibility display Councillor Hoxie and I will know, because we have it engraved on our hearts, holy God, that it is measurable, and however much we might think as laymen, this is not a particularly safe exit, or it's potentially a dangerous one in certain circumstances. If our highways officer, and I do make the point that, but I think when we had an officer present or not, we went through it last time, and I think, as I say, however much our lay opinion and local opinion may well say this is not a sensible thing, if we go against the highways measurable criteria, we are frankly on a loser.
Chairman, if I could,
Yeah, certainly.
just ask Paul to clarify something. Paul, I think there were a number of extra. There were 2 extra garages being put in. Were they for
Yeah,
number 36
so-
and number 34?
So these 2 parking spaces here, they are for the neighbouring properties number 34 and 36. They're providing on-site parking for those frontage properties as part of this development. So it's taking parking from the main road into the development site. So it's an argument to say it's improving the current situation.
Again, I think the conditions have been parking.
Yes.
Expanded.
I mean, there's another point about it. I think the 2 cars were those 2 houses, and the builder's band is doing some pointing on the cottage, so probably won't be a problem.
Councillor Gordon Brown.
Chairman, thank you. I agree with Councillor Locke's comments about the housing officer's presentation last week. Very useful. However, I think it clarified the matter, but also confused us, I think, to some extent, and the documentation is spread over a number of documents, and maybe from this meeting there could be some thought about just pulling that on a single document, so that both officers have a single document to work from, and more importantly, lay people like members of the committee also can look at that document and clearly understand the nuances that have taken place since the original core strategy and the SAP DPD in 2000 and 2014, plus the changes to NPPF over the last 10 years now, just to bring it all up to date, so they've got a single document clarifying all those points. Because part of the information is now within a cabinet report going back to 2016.
Like I say, I totally appreciate it. It isn't an easy thing to follow. It certainly isn't for officers. So for anybody else, totally appreciate that. I'll see what we can do.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So I think we've moved to the point where Councillor McCartney.
Only a quick one. I was going to say the same thing about the access, which is that I don't like it, but we can measure these things. We can have a presentation last time for highways officer who said that it is acceptable access. I think for me, provision of 2 garages and therefore hopefully taking 2 cars, parked cars off the street outside would help that, and is showing willing by the applicant. I'm still disappointed about the commuted sums and a little bit of a kick in the eye of things. Throw up a couple more garages that can't add in some affordable housing of some sort. But I do get it that a development like this, the commuted sum is a more appropriate answer to that, as we said last time. So I think on balance, to me, it's probably still close, but I think it was closer to being in favour this time than it was last.
Just a point of clarification with garages. Are they the residents of number 34 and 32? Are they going to rent those then off? Is that how it works?
Sorry.
How are they going to be paid for? The garage is not going to give them to them for nothing, presumably, are they?
The applicant owns, and so the red line and blue line, if you look at the blue line, that's land also in the ownership of the applicant. So that comes under their ownership.
36 does, 34 doesn't, does it?
35 is in the blue line. So there'll be some kind of legal agreement in terms of the sale between the owner of that property and the garage itself, which is obviously something we won't get involved with.
36. Right. So 35 is owned by the applicant.
36.
36, yes. It's the blue line encompasses 36. So that's land owned by the applicant, but doesn't form part of the application site. So the application site is red, and the blue line indicates other land in ownership of the applicant.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm looking for a proposal. Councillor Oxford.
You know, as I said, I think proposed approval as per the officer's recommendation.
Do I have a seconder? I saw Councillor Payne, and all those in favour, please. And against? Is that everybody? Yes. Good. So that is duly approved. Thank you very much indeed. If members of the public wish to depart before we start on the next one, they're very welcome to do so.
No, it goes up in two.
Yeah, it's back in even.
Yes.
It does look like there's a part for me.
He lives in Australia, and his mother lives here.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you very much.
So, Chairman, this is an application at 9 High Street East in Uppingham. The application is to change the colour of the woodwork of a Grade 2 star listed building, and then for a number of basement signs. This is the application site here. You can see outlined in red, and the photograph of the front of the building, which I think was taken by Councillor Oxley. I think this one was. That is the property. There has been a red paint put on it. Sorry. Back. So the application has been in for a little while. There's been discussions with the council's conservation officer on this one, because there was concern about the red colour that was on the building, and the conservation officer has now agreed a more muted colour. So if we just go through the plans, this is forgive the colours, but what is shown is obviously painting of the shop front, and then the signage to the frontage. So some of it is translucent with the outline through, and then obviously you've got the more the yellow background signage in a few places, which are, I think, they're vinyl stickers that are to go into the windows. This is an example in the corridor at the moment. There's an alleyway to the side of the building. It has these vinyl stickers on there already, quite bright mixed colours. This is what was originally proposed for the corridor. The conservation officer had some concerns about the amount of signage and colours, and so it has been now reduced so that it is just the far left-hand side of the alleyway to be infilled. So this is another one. I think that is the final one that is conditioned to be approved. This is another version of what is to go in that final pane. These are some of the signage that's around the building. It's on predominantly the front and the side paint, and then to the rear doors, and there is a hanging sign proposed as well. This is the revised colour, which is a more maroon finish rather than the strident red that is on the building at the moment. This just shows a picture. You can just see the building as it was before with a cream finish, and you can see there's a hanging sign between the windows which is supposed to be replaced. These, I took a walk around just a bit up and down the street just to see some of the other shades of different reds that there were there. So this is the building as it is now. Seems quite a bright red at the moment. But there were a number of other shops which were a slightly darker, more maroon coloured red, which is what we've sought to negotiate and condition. So in terms of the policies, it's a grade 2 star listed building, like I've said. So it's important that we preserve and enhance and protect the character of that listed building and the conservation area setting. We do have shop front guidance for signs and security, and the neighbourhood plan as well, which talks about protecting again and preserving the character and appearance of the conservation areas. Overall, following the amended plans that we've had in and the toning down of the strident red, the conservation officer is happy with the proposals and has recommended approval of the scheme now. I have set out though in the addendum, I've just tweaked the conditions and revised them. What I have realised is that I've copied one of them wrong, I think. Yes, I apologise. So the first one, condition 1, that says work shall begin before the expiration of 3 years from the date of this consent. What that should actually say is it should also have a bit. Well, did I have it on as a fourth condition? Sorry, Chairman, forgive me. I did. Apologies, I forgot what I did at the end. Sorry, so yes, condition 1 stays as it is. Condition 2 I've amended to show the amended plan, which was this one, which the conservation officer was happy with for the signage in the alleyway section. Condition 3 just updates the details of the relevant signage and how it's going to be fitted to the building. Predominantly, this is about the hanging sign that's proposed to make sure that that's fitted appropriately. And then finally, and where I was getting confused, condition 4, I added, which was that the shop front should be painted in an approved Dulux Monarch colour within 3 months of the date of this consent, so that to get it repainted in the colour that the conservation officer has found appropriate. Subject to that, it's recommended for approval.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Is that your?
Yeah, that's
thank
me.
you. Councillor Oxley, as the ward member.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for use of my photograph as well. I must say, I was surprised when I first saw them painting the front of the shop. I believe that it actually went in, it was painted shortly after they moved in, and they've been in there for about, well, it was before the summer. In fact, some of the paint you'll see on the photograph that I sent in on the top left-hand corner is flaking. It's been on there for such a long time. On the top right-hand corner, I should say, underneath the lead. But this is a very sensitive part of Uppingham, very sensitive part of Uppingham. And in fact, if you go through the alleyway, behind the building is I think it's a 15th century or 16th century stone mullioned window with stained glass in, and so whilst the alleyway is a little bit, the yard itself is a little bit down at heel. It's an important architecturally, and the building, the room above as well is I think, well, that's where they had the old. When you went into the school, they had the clothes up there for the sportswear, because the building is owned by Uppingham School and rented to Laws from them. And the yard is actually owned by Uppingham School as well. So it is an important building, and it faces onto the marketplace. So you can see next door, there's the shop next door is painted blue. Goodwin and Bell, I think that is. So when I first moved into town, very few of the shops were actually painted in strident colours, and they tried to sit back and not be too in your face. The red is a little bit in your face, but then it's the Loros corporate identity. I mean, every Loros shop is painted the same. Their logo is that colour. So it's, and they are going to put across the front the Loros signage as well, as per the photograph of the next photograph along. You can see that. You're testing that one, yeah. So so there will be a board going across the top to say that it is a Loros shop. Loros is doing a very good job. It's one of the very, very good hospices. Well, it is the hospice for the whole of Leicestershire and Rutland. But it's based over Glenfield. But they're I mean, I'll give it a plug or anything. But and say the red is already there, and it has been there for quite a long time. So I think whilst there have been objections, people now are used to seeing the colour. No, Gordon's shaking his head. And I know that some shopkeepers are not happy to see it. As I say, I have concerns. I do have concerns about it, mainly because of the location, its proximity to the yard at the back, and also the marketplace. I think it's going to be very difficult to find anything which will enable them to use their sort of corporate logo. When it was up in school books, it was just green and yellow. It was very gentle, and now it is very much in your face. I'll hear what everybody else has to say. Listen to what everybody else has to say. I'm still 50-50, I think. Sit on the fence. I'm not going to come out either way because I like it and also I don't like it. So right here, I'll hear what everybody else has to say. Sorry, I couldn't be more specific.
I'll
Councillor
defer.
Cross and then Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Cross.
No, I'll defer to
He's letting me go.
Councillor McCarthy.
I can be.
Yeah, ladies first. You know.
It looks like the Labour Party approved it. So I think I might go
Official objection.
because it looks like the Labour Party approved it. But this is an apolitical room, so I'm I'm sorry, I'm still not quite clear. Is that bright red going and the more maroon colour is coming, isn't it?
Yes.
Will the yellow stripe remain?
So yes, the yellow has not changed. This is the colour that has been approved,
Yeah.
or that we are recommending, which is this proposed monarch colour now, which is a more maroon colour, I think, than what is on there at the moment. It depends on which photographs you look as to the shade. Let me just see. I think it's on that photo and this one down the bottom.
Yeah.
It certainly appears a much more vivid red than the Dulux Monarch that we have here.
Right. And the yellow stripe is staying.
The yellow has not been changed. I think the conservation officer was what didn't raise a significant objection to that. It was more the vivid red that he had raised a concern about.
Okay, so the Labour red's going, but the Lib Dem yellow's staying.
Yeah.
Mind you, this is not a political committee.
Calling out of order.
Where's the ball?
That's a husband catch.
I have nothing further to say.
Councillor Cross.
Mine is a very minor point. But in here it says Dulux Monarch. Now, I'm not too sure about advertising. We shouldn't really be advertising. Now, is it Dulux Monarch or is it Monarch the colour? Now, if Monarch is the colour, we should delete Dulux.
No, I think I think it is Dulux Monarch. Dulux is the make and Monarch is the colour. I don't think you can take one from the other. It is that.
I'm being very petty. I'm being very petty. But if we stipulate a particular maker's paint be used,
Yeah.
I think it's slightly dangerous.
That is what the applicants have submitted to us.
Right, that's fine. I like it. Very old fashioned, but I like it.
Chairman, I don't think I like it. Let me start off. This is a grade 2 star listed building. It's not just an ordinary grade 2 building, you know, in the high street, which looks nice. This is a grade 2 star, very important in the market square. My gut feel says to me that this is not appropriate finish for the front. The side I'm less worried about because it doesn't go onto the market square, but the front really does concern me. And I think I'm happier with the dark red, although I'd like to see even less saturation than that than there is already. It's the yellow that really gets to me, and it's also the yellow that gets to people who have actually contacted me. In fact, even today, I had a phone call from a resident being very concerned about it. You know, I'd already had concerns, and I think there's, you know, Justin and I have an exchange of emails about, as the rest of the committee know, about exactly what was on offer. I wasn't clear, I'm now clear, and I still feel that is not right for the market square at Uppingham. I think it's just, I understand the brand of Loris. I understand it probably better than most. I suffered at the hands of planning committees on the other side of the fence when I was a chief executive of a retail company. Yeah, and I do appreciate it. But now, sitting here tonight, I would sympathise with the idea of keeping a low profile in that particular situation, particularly like grade 2 star listed building as anything else. It's also got, I know the town council are unhappy about it. And I think, you know, and the neighbourhood plan have to make it very clear that it should be in keeping. And I don't believe this is in keeping with the market square.
Just going to bring Mr. Johnson in and then Councillor Baxby.
Chairman, because I'm sensing the concern that members have got, just asking a couple of questions. One option would be obviously to defer the item so that we go back to the applicants and express the concern that members have and look at an alternative. What I would be keen to know from members is, in terms of the shop frontage and the signage, but the shop frontage in particular, in terms of the yellow, does anybody have a suggestion, a preference for that in terms of a different colour, a different tone of yellow or cream? I don't know. And the other one is, would you be happy if it was just the signage across the front and then the vinyl stickers that are going in the window, if they maintain the Loris brand colours, where they're although they need listed building consent, they're vinyl in the paint and can be easily removed at some point in the future. It's not painting the building as such. I just don't know what members' thoughts are on that.
I'm sure that will be taken into consideration. Councillor Baxby.
Yeah, I've got a solution for that. As this is a historic building, it should be in keeping. It should be put back to the original colour. And you shouldn't have corporate colours on historic buildings like that. Sorry.
Councillor Andrew Brown.
I'm just wondering why it's got, because it says in the middle, Loris Hospice Shop, and then it also says Loris on the left, Loris on the right, and Loris on the door. Do we really need so many Lorises? Laura, is that the collective noun for Lorises? It just seems a bit over the top to have it so many times.
It looks more like a post office.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, listening to what members have said, I concur with what has been said. And looking at that picture now, having had more time to look at it, I think if we just had the strip across the top, Laura's red and yellow, just that thin strip. And then the windows and the door and everything else back to the way it was. That would make the point. That would make the point that it was actually a shop. So that's one option for members to have a think about, to have discuss.
Councillor Beggy.
I tend to agree with Gordon and others about being in keeping in the middle of a historical town. It's, well, the town has got some interesting flashing signage in other places, but but certainly this is not keeping. And I think there is many ways that they can brand this shop without having to make it look as described as a post office. The yellow band, for example, does not have to go all the way across. Why can it not just be a band in the middle? And I do not think that it necessarily needs to be bright red all over. I think it should be far more in keeping with the rest of the town. Someone who works with branding on a day-to-day basis, you can do a lot with branding without having to make something as garish as this. I have just one question though for Justin about precedents and likely of any appeals. The other red shops, have they also had to have planning permission?
That I haven't checked. Let's just have a look at the.
Would they have would the applicant?
It would be more whether they needed listed building consent or not. I would have thought that some of them would probably have had listed building consent. I can't sit here and give you a guarantee.
Is that a material consideration? Could the applicant quote those precedents?
I think that any appeal, if I was the applicant, I'd certainly go down and say, well, why is this inappropriate when you have other red shops in the area? Now, I think the issue that we have is that they are a certainly more subdued shade of red or maroon than the existing. So I think we could reasonably argue, as we have suggested, a darker red to the shop frontage, and then I think we as officers can go back and express the concern that members have got and ask them to reconsider the amount of signage and the amount of the use of the yellow and see whether they can minimise that. I think it would be difficult to argue that painting the whole of the shop front in a more appropriate red. I think that would be difficult given what some other buildings are painted in the area, and the advice of the conservation officer who says that if it's painted darker red, then that is acceptable.
I've got Councillor Ball, then Councillor Baxby.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, members, I would be very much inclined that we defer this item before us this evening so that we get an outcome that is more in keeping with the high street in Uppingham. As other councillors have said, it's a conservation area, it's grade 2 star listed. We've often referred to the high street as one of the jewels in the crown of this county. I don't personally believe that a company logo, company brand is sacrosanct. In fact, you see this all over the country. I could take you to a small supermarket in Westminster in London. You would not know it is a national supermarket chain until you're virtually going in the door, because that image is not allowed. And I think we should be working in the future to withdrawing back to perhaps something more appropriate for, I think, this jewel in the crown. I think it's very part with an accountancy background, but also in a major printing background in Courtney. You would not normally allow a client to change one colour without looking at the other, because the palette changes. Although yellow, technically, you can change the colour of yellow 20% before the human eye picks it up. It's the worst colour for the human eye, but that I'm going into more technical spectrometry and all the rest of it. So I don't think what we have before us is acceptable. I would be going further than just a simple colour change. I'm not too concerned about the passageway, the reduction does seem to be appropriate from a commercial point of view. And I would always advocate from a sales and marketing point of view, you do not plaster and clever up your windows. You are wanting to invite people into your business. One of the major supermarkets was historically said the biggest builder of pyramids since the Egyptians, the way they were blocking their windows, but I digress. But no, I don't think we can do justice to bypassing this evening, and I think we should. But we now then need to be very clear as to what we are going to ask our officers to achieve. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bain.
Yes, I think we've made comments about the passageway. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the passageway from the marketplace. So I think all of it should be changed, not just the frontage. And it's the combination of the red and the yellow. It's just too garish, and it just stands out too badly. So I'm against the.
I've got Councillor Begg, Councillor Blacksby, and Councillor McCarthy in that order. And Councillor Cross.
Me first. Yes, sorry, I've just had a quick look at some of the Loros images for Oakham. They've got a white frontage with a more subtle red logo above the door. They've seemingly since then updated it to garish red, but at some point they've had a much more toned down approach, which is far more in keeping.
Councillor Blacksby.
Yes, it was brought up a little while by Justin about he didn't know whether the other listed buildings had got permission for changing the colours. I think we should find that out, because if they have, we should make them change them back the original colours.
Councillor McCarthy, then Councillor Cross.
Thanks, Chair. If you go to Malden Marsh or Stowe-on-the-Wold, then you see a lot of well-known names on the high streets through those villages or small towns, whatever you want to call them. And you wouldn't know from the signage that they were of a particular brand. They have very discreet signs on the fronts there. I don't see any difference between that and Oakham. So I think whilst I was joking about the Labour Party moving in area, I don't like the yellow stripe. I don't like the fact that it says Loros 4 times along the front. They could have a very muted Loros sign along, just above the front door in a very tasteful metal sign, and say the same thing. And I think actually Councillor Page is right about the view of the passageway from the high street as well. I think if we're going to insist on the change on the front, we ought to follow suit all the way around.
Sorry,
the passageway as well.
didn't mean to cut you off. Councillor Cross.
Mr. Chair, it's a little bit like painting by numbers. Are we satisfied with the maroon? Bear in mind that maroon up there is what I call a ruddy red, and Rutland is Rutland because of the ruddy red soil in places. A question, the first question, I now agree extraordinarily with Gordon about the yellow stripe, but in my first comment, I was merely commenting upon the maroon, which I thought was more in keeping with a market town. And I think we should go with it. Are we satisfied with the maroon colour?
I think to add, I think you've got your conservation officer who's obviously recommended that colour. So we're going to go.
I think we've got to get to the basics of this. If we're going to start giving advice to our applicants, we've got to now decide on which colour do we prefer.
I think that's crucially for me. I can go back and I can negotiate from what I've heard tonight. I think, but the key thing that I need to know is the maroon, like you've asked, Councillor Cross. This is a colour that the conservation officer has suggested is acceptable.
I'll just be Jurassic red.
Jurassic. Oh, that's horrible.
So, members, I'm going to come in now and take you through the report. Sorry to be boring, but I think there are quite a number of issues. If you start on para 3 at the minus page 33, and you've got the Uppingham neighbourhood plan, which quite clearly says that all future development in town centre should comply with town council, etc., etc. So it's very clear that the neighbourhood plan, certainly in spirit, wanted to preserve the essential character of the town centre. So that was the first thing. The second, if you move on to para 6, the second paragraph there, the premises would visually alter the appearance of the building. The property is prominent. Is used. Now, to me, that suggests that that is a personal opinion from the conservation officer, not an objective criterion that whether it is a commercial brand or otherwise, it is simply the conservation officer, and not, I would say, enthusiastically, but he is prepared to accept a compromise. As I say, I think that is subjective. If you look at paragraph 17, there is no material benefit that could be considered to outweigh the harm. That was on his original statement. Now, I don't know about you, but to turn a slight shade of red and say that it's suddenly public benefit, and I do think, and other members have already made this about their actual appearance. Now, I can quite see that if you're lost in a shopping arcade in Leicester, you want to put something that stands out from everything else. And I think we are all sort of very well aware of the good work that the particular charity does. We're not questioning that at all, but it doesn't mean that they have a clear role to bring something inappropriate. So as I say, I think in Leicester Arcade or Leicester Shopping Arcade, yes, absolutely fine. In a prominent place in Uppingham, no. The town council are firmly against it. Mr. Oxley and I will have a wry smile. It is not always the case that the town council and the neighbourhood plan group coincide. I think it does say something that there is a university. But then if I could come to neighbour representation, that is tip of the iceberg. I have had people coming to me over the past week or two. They would have objected, but they thought we'd already approved this as a colour, because as Councillor Oxley said, it has been painted for some little time. Oh, we didn't bother objecting. We thought it had already gone through. Now, I know that, that's sort of no excuse in that sense. It is an anomalous position, and I think, again, you actually looking at that, it's not strictly material, but it's what the neighbourhood plan had in mind. Those of us who have attended many conferences on market towns, the first indication of decay is a proliferation of charity shops. And it's not so much that it's a proliferation, but it is in a very prominent position. And I'm quite sure that it could perfectly well, I don't think the benefit, the public benefit, would be altered in the least. People who come to Uppingham will walk past Lawros. The other thing is, and again, take Councillor Beggy's point about the Oakley shop, Lawros traded the opposite side of the road in Rutland without a garish red facade. As far as I remember, they didn't repaint it at all. And as far as I know, the reason they were moved into larger premises is because they were very successful, which is absolutely fine. But they didn't need to have this garish facade in order to attract customers. So I would feel very strongly that we should, well, if you wish to defer it, fine, but we should certainly refuse the current application. I think it's completely inappropriate. And as I say, that's my subjective view, but I think, and I hope I've demonstrated by looking at the report that it doesn't validate it. I see Councillor Banks and Councillor Andrew Brown, and then I bring Councillor Paul Brown and give Councillor Oxley an opportunity to come in later. Okay.
No, I was just going to say I propose that.
Refusal.
Mr. Chair, I was going to say, did they get permission or apply for permission to paint it red like that in the first place?
Retrospect.
So this is a retrospective application.
Well, could have taken that, I suppose. Yes, yes, in effect, and that's the point that Councillor Oxley made on his email. Councillor Paul Brown.
I take the point that this is, as Councillor Bull said, this is a jewel in the crown, and various people have mentioned the other places where they've been done it sympathetically. But surely it's not for us to decide as a planning committee on colours, really. It's a matter of policy, is it not? I think the policy ought to be brought in. A lot of the new planning white papers are talking about the importance of having design as being a major feature, in fact, a major critical point. So I think we have a design officer, I'm not quite sure, within the council, but there should, if there is a design officer, then surely that should come into his remit, and we should make a decision to have a policy that anything on these high streets should come before either that design officer or somebody within the planning department to give an overall guidance as to how we feel that this should happen in the future, because we're going to get a preponderance of colours in all directions. The guy next door's got a blue colour. It's not particularly one I would like, but it's difficult for us to make a decision on one without being unfair to them. I think we need a general policy as to how we're going.
That's a very fair point. Councillor Oxley.
Thank you. It's just coming back on that point. There has been a development creep in the high street over the past 5 years. I've noticed that some shops have started to paint their fronts, and for example, the shop next door that I mentioned, the blue one, I don't remember a planning application going in for that building. And whilst the applicant may be able to say, well, there are shop colours, shop fronts of different colours down the high street, so it's quite natural for us to want to have a similar. I really do think that we should perhaps ask the enforcement officer to go and have a word with the people who have been painting the fronts of their shops these colours, and ask them why they did, if they haven't got permission, why they didn't get permission, because we may find that they wouldn't have been able to paint it blue if it had come to us to decide. And I would like to have a photograph put up of the way the shop was before. I think you've got one, haven't you, Justin? That one, that's it. So that's what it looked like before.
Yeah.
And that was when the Uppingham School owned it. So it was painted white, because there are features on the front of the building. I think there are some cast iron pillars incorporated into the design as well. So it's a beautiful design. And the building is actually 15th or 16th century as per the description, and that's shown by the back. And Uppingham had a major refurb in the 18th century, when a lot of it looked a lot like Lavenham, as I understand it, in the 18th century, and they took down the fronts and put stone fronts on. So that shop front has probably been like that 100, 150 years, and the shop across the road, as you know, the plough on the front has been, on the top, it's been there since 1850. And it's been unchanged since 1850. So it is a very sensitive part of the town. And I'm tempted to say that we should actually refuse it.
Sorry,
I just wanted to there's 2 points regarding, if you go for refusal tonight, then obviously you're going to have to give very sound reasons why. At the moment, obviously, if they were to appeal, you'd have conservation officer coming in saying that it is appropriate. Obviously, the other option is to defer, but we would need clear guidance from members on how, on what basis, what you would like to see there, and let you give them the opportunity to come in with another application. So that's just what I'm thinking, that we take the papers that we've got now, go for and against them, that's if they appeal it. Whereas we could give them an opportunity to come back with something more appropriate. I also wanted to make a point that regarding those, unless they're listed buildings, those are the properties that painted their fronts, they don't need listed building consent.
But it's a conservation area, and I think there has to be.
That would be a policy. No, I don't think they do. No, it's only listed buildings that need, well, we need listed building consent to change the colour. So through the conservation, so that might be why we were spot. I'm sure that would be part of that.
I've got Councillor Banks, but Councillor Gordon Brown, and then Councillor Cross.
That's what I'm trying to say earlier about any buildings that have been painted without conservation buildings, listed buildings that have been painted without permission. We shouldn't let them use that as an excuse to come back at us. We should actually audit the other buildings and make sure they are come back to the planning and change the buildings back to the original colours.
Councillor Blanchby, sorry, just to confirm, I'm not aware that there have been any painted without listed building consent, because it's something that our enforcement officer would pick up on. I just said that I couldn't guarantee without doing a check first, but I will go back and check.
That's what I said, Justin. If we could audit it,
Yeah,
I think
we-
that would be
I
the
will
best
do.
way. Yes.
Councillor, pick up point Councillor Paul Brown made about design code. In particular, because this is a localised area, this would be an ideal code for the neighbourhood plan to pick up at Uppingham and decide what it wants for the future of the square and the high street. I mean, this is what neighbourhood plans, apart from allocating sites and all that matter, but this is really where neighbourhood plans can come into their own. So I think that is much more where it should happen, rather than at a major policy level within the county. We do have our design code in draft form. I'm sure that'll be coming forward soon, I hope. In which case that will have an overall view, but for localised areas, it should be the neighbourhood plan. There is one already in the county. But I think coming back to the point that was raised earlier, if we reject this tonight, why we're rejecting it? Well, I think certainly from my point of view, very strongly, it's a grade 2 listed building, and I keep grade 2 star listed building. That star is very important. It's not just your run-of-the-mill grade 2 listed building. It is very important. It's got a long history to it, and therefore it's in a particular setting. I think while the conservation officer is trying to find a solution, I would hate to say, but I don't think the solution on this particular occasion is ideal for that location. Now, there's a problem, and I think his professional opinion is there, but I think from a local point of view and from an Uppingham point of view, the opinions of the local people, in particular the town council and residents, is such that this is should have something that's more appropriate. In fact, the comment I made to Justin, if they could turn the saturation down in the colours to make them more muted, that would move a long way towards making it more subtle, rather than the rather harsh yellow and even the muddy red that we now have, or even the Rutland red that Councillor Cross talks about. I think that the challenge between those two colours is just so dramatic that I think it's not appropriate. And I think what we're saying is either we refuse it on the basis that the colours are just too dramatic against each other, the contrast too much, or we defer it and ask the applicant to come back with more muted colours that are more appropriate for that particular location at this point.
Just add just to that point there, is because if the applicant did then go ahead and if you did refuse it tonight, it takes complete control control if it was then approved on appeal, doesn't it, by inspector, whereas I suppose if you keep it within your control and you defer to manage, you're going to have a lot more control over what actually is there in the end. So that's just a practical.
No, I think that is very sound advice from the legal officer. And I mean, sorry, Councillor Cross, will bring you in a second. I mean, what we're looking for is an acceptable solution. I entirely agree with Councillor Gordon Brown. I don't think the conservation officer's attempt in this particular instance was appropriate to the location. Again, I mean, Councillor Oxley will confirm this. I walked down the high street to see if there were any other red buildings, and I could only find two. One local estate agent who actually has a maroon thing, and the convenience paper shop. And those were the only two I could find. Now, in each case, they were simply the edge of the painted woodwork, not the glazing bars and not the whole frontage. So a very different, I'm not, of course, in such a prominent position. But, sorry, Councillor Cross, you were waiting patiently.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just be interested just to hear again what our legal officers said. Should we refuse or should we defer?
Defer, because I think.
Defer. I'm quite willing to second Councillor Langsby's proposition to defer it. However, I still come back to the fact that our officers do need guidance, because they're between the devil and the deep blue sea. Furthermore, on this particular matter, the conservation officer, I believe, should possibly have been in attendance this evening, because he or she would learn about the concerns of the local population in Uppingham, and we also would learn from he or she of why they chose maroon, ruddy red, but allowed the yellow stripe. So I will second Councillor Blanksby, and I think we should defer it.
Before I move down the vote, I'm bringing Councillor Beck in.
Just a quick one, just doing some research on our very own useful website. The other red one down the line, Hereford's, has got listed building approval for that red colour.
It has.
I would say that a darker, more subtle red is an appropriate heritage colour. You will see it on lots of old Georgian doors and things like that would have been painted in that colour. So I think a darker red is appropriate, but I've listened to obviously what members have said today, and what we'll do is we will go back to the applicant and ask them to take on board all those comments and come up with a revised scheme that seeks to reduce the shade and the amount of yellow that's on the building. Look at alternative colours, a darker red potentially, or alternative colours for the shop front, so that not all of it is possibly red and just parts of it. And also to reduce the amount of signs they've got on the frontage as well.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I forgot. This goes back to Councillor Bull's comment about papering over the windows. And actually, having listened to that, I don't think there is any need for them to put any advertising as shown in the windows. And again, because the fenestration in an old building is very, very important. Justin just mentioned yellow. Now, I think yellow is unacceptable in this particular situation, and therefore Loris must go away from their marketing guru's wish to impose what they think is marketable and come back to what is acceptable.
Yeah, just a point that was brought up over, I don't know who it was that brought it up, but about the glazing bars. It's not necessary to have the glazing bars in whatever red they decide or we decide.
Councillor Darby.
I think Councillor Beggy's down in the thorn outside here,
Yeah,
is trying to.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, we can't reject or defer this if.
That's next.
I think
the yellow.
we can the yellow, I agree, we can the yellow. I think we've got to be really careful though about being seen to compromise with people, with applicants on listed building applications, because I don't think other towns would be, or authorities would be compromising with applicants on listed building applications. I think we've got to send some sort of message about the fact that we're not really going to be compromising on these things.
I would like to make a point though, that that building, which is a long way down the high street next to the Crown Passage, that isn't in such a prominent place.
Exactly.
That is what we're talking about this evening.
Grade 2 star.
It's not grade 2 star either.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, every particular application is taken on its merit. So if that's in a different street, slightly different street, still in a different building, and obviously then it changes it.
Yeah.
However, taking that to while within the street scene. So, you know, it could potentially have some balance, I have to say, for the inspector's decision on basically that we've already approved it. So it may have some materiality to it.
But I would suggest that was actually done under delegated powers. I don't remember that.
I don't recollect that coming to committee.
No.
Perhaps Mr. Johnson could help. Did we have any
I don't know when that was, does councillor Meggie know when it was approved?
2017.
It predates my time, I'm afraid.
Yes. I certainly wasn't aware.
I don't remember.
I mean,
It didn't come to
I honestly think that in terms of a red.
Yes, exactly. Your point earlier. Councillor Cross. Sorry,
No.
I was going to say, Councillor Beggy said something about the design of the Oakham shop. Is there a picture of the Oakham shop where we could?
They've now painted it bright red. So. But it does beg the question whether or not that could exist.
Well, members, I think we're being steered very firmly towards deferral.
Yeah.
I think it is something that I would suggest that informally, perhaps the planning officer, local member, and it's not for me to suggest for the chairman, but wearing my hat as your heritage champion, I think I can possibly bring a little bit of experience anyway into that. So we've got a proposal on the table for deferral. Councillor Baxter, seconded by Councillor Cross. All those in favour of deferral? Sorry.
I thought councillor Blanford proposed refusal.
Sorry.
It were to reject, but I will confront that, to defer.
I think, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. I thought after the advice from my right,
Yeah.
that was the direction you were heading in. Yeah. So, right.
And just to clarify, so it's deferral subject to the planning officer, the board member and chairman meeting with the applicant to discuss. Is that
Yes,
right,
well,
Justin? Is that right?
Do you want to meet with the applicant as well to be involved in that, or do you want us to come back with some design options once officers have spoken?
I would suggest officers speak to them.
I think that you, I, and officers ought to meet first of all,
Yeah.
and then leave it to the officers to go and talk to the applicant. If that is,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. So we have got the proposal on the table for the deferral. All those in favour, please.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. And I do think Councillor Paul Brown's point about having a policy, because otherwise it does go into subjectivity.
Yeah.
Very, yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you very much indeed. Now just moving on, any other business? Oh, did they? Yeah. Sorry. One meeting judgment, please.
I just think it might be worth of this committee if we just spend a few moments afterwards on exactly what Paul Brown was saying, because I was going to bring that to the table as well.
Yeah.
Because when I was on this committee many years ago, I remember we had something very similar in Oakham, where we were then setting out a policy, and this was with a particular doorway, canopy, etc. And we threw that out. So I'm a little bit concerned if we've lost that sort of control that I thought we had in place, particularly when we're talking about areas of Oakham and certainly the High Street and its surrounds in Uppingham. So perhaps, and I hear what Councillor Brown was saying, this is coming shortly, but now is the time for a little bit of, perhaps a little bit more of restructuring, because what happens in other areas, and you've mentioned various other towns in the Cotswolds, the way they overcome that, if there is something garish, they have that within their regulations, that when there is a change of ownership or it's a new, then that is the time that you can actually take it back somewhat to a more in keeping overall policy. And over a question of 10 years, you can do a huge amount of recovery to this county. And I think we should think about that very carefully.
I think that's very reasonable. Under any other business, Councillor Gordon Brown, I know, want to make a point about the Gambling Act.
Thank you, Chair. Just that all councils have received a request from governments to consider the amendments to our policy on gambling. I appreciate we only have two shops in the county, but I just felt that it was worthwhile discussing it. In fact, I had hoped that we might have a chance to discuss it very briefly this evening. However, in discussion with the governance and with the chair, it is coming forward on October 23rd, November 23rd, when we'll be able to have a chance to look at it in detail. That'll be after the end of the consultation, so we'll know what the consultation feedback has been, if there has been any. Such a really exciting topic. I'm sure there'll be lots. But I'm sure we can have a look at that and just make sure we're happy with it as a committee. So we can put that on the agenda. I know it will be. I'm going to bring it forward at that point. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I think the consultation public ends on Friday the 15th, which is also Friday the 15th. Sorry. Yeah. So again, if you think of anybody who might be alerted to it, do.
I remember actually a previous member of, I can't remember who was a member of this committee, but it was a member of the council who was, whenever we discussed, you know, the member for Ketton, whenever we discussed licensing, he always came on about the size of jackpots. I can't
No, yes, you're right.
I can't remember that second. Well, he was saying that they were too big. And
Anthony Condy.
Condy, that's right, Gary Condy, yes, bless him. And he was always concerned about the size of jackpots for machines that pay out in the county. So just thought I'd throw that in, but it's an important role that we have to play, I think, in listening to the residents of the county. And perhaps Gary will be able to say something not as a member.
Absolutely. I think that is it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your attendance. And close the meeting. I think it's almost exactly 8:30. I think it's probably 8:29. I'm not sure. 8:28. There we are. Thank you very much indeed.